The file hit Jessica's face so hard her cheek stung. Papers scattered across the polished floor of the executive conference room while 12 people pretended not to see. Director Park stood over her, his face twisted with contempt, speaking Korean she'd learned to understand but wasn't supposed to admit she knew. Words like worthless, incompetent, a diversity hire who didn't belong. Jessica bent to gather the documents with shaking hands, her natural curls falling forward to hide the tears burning behind her eyes, unaware that across the city, the most dangerous man in Seoul was about to change her life forever. Welcome to Black in Seoul TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Jessica Clark had been in Seoul for 8 months, working as a financial analyst at Hwarang Corporation, one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea. She'd graduated top of her class from Stanford, spoke 3 languages, and had recommendations that made recruiters fight over her. None of that mattered here. She was Black, she was American, she was a woman, and she was alone in a country that reminded her daily she didn't belong. The humiliation came in waves, small at first. Her ideas presented by male colleagues who took credit. Her reports questioned more harshly than anyone else's. Coffee orders disguised as professional requests. Then it escalated. Director Park, her immediate supervisor, had made her his personal target. He'd assign her impossible deadlines, then publicly berate her when she asked for clarification. He'd speak about her in Korean during meetings, making cruel jokes that made others laugh while she sat there, understanding every word, dying inside. But Jessica needed this job. Her student loans were crushing. Her mother back in Atlanta was sick, needing treatments insurance barely covered. This position paid 3 times what she'd make in the States, and she'd signed a 2-year contract with penalties for early termination that would bankrupt her. So she swallowed the discrimination, documented everything in files she kept hidden, and told herself she could survive anything for money and her mother's health. That evening, Jessica left the office after 9, her eyes red from crying in the bathroom. The subway was crowded, bodies pressed together, and she felt a hand grab her inappropriately in the crush of people. She tried to move away, but the crowd held her trapped. When she finally escaped at her stop, she was shaking, exhausted, done. The walk from the station to her tiny apartment took 15 minutes through streets that felt hostile in the darkness. She'd almost made it home when she heard the footsteps behind her. 3 men, speaking low Korean, their intent clear in their laughter. Jessica walked faster, her heart hammering. She reached for her phone, but a hand grabbed her wrist, yanking her into an alley. She screamed, but a palm covered her mouth. They shoved her against a wall, and Jessica fought with everything she had, the way her father had taught her before he died. She got one man in the face with her elbow, another in the groin with her knee. But there were 3 of them, and she was alone, and she was losing. Then suddenly she wasn't. A figure appeared at the mouth of the alley, backlit by streetlights, moving with predatory grace. He spoke one word in Korean, low and deadly, and the men froze. Jessica couldn't see his face clearly, just his silhouette, tall and broad-shouldered, radiating danger so intense the air itself seemed to vibrate. The leader of her attackers said something dismissive, posturing. The stranger moved so fast Jessica barely tracked it. One moment he was 5 feet away, the next his fist connected with the leader's jaw with a crack that echoed off brick walls. The man dropped like his strings had been cut. The other 2 pulled knives. The stranger smiled, and even in the darkness, Jessica saw it was the smile of something that enjoyed violence. He disarmed the first attacker in 2 moves, breaking his wrist with casual efficiency. The second tried to run. The stranger caught him by the collar and slammed him into the wall hard enough to dent the concrete. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. Then the stranger turned to Jessica, and she finally saw his face clearly in the dim light. He was Korean, probably early 30s, devastatingly handsome in a way that made her breath catch despite the adrenaline. Sharp features, intense dark eyes, black hair pushed back from his forehead. He wore an expensive suit that somehow looked perfect despite the violence he'd just delivered. But what struck her most were his hands, elegant and brutal, checking her for injuries with surprising gentleness. "Are you hurt?" he asked in perfect English, his voice deep and accented. Jessica shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Up close, she could see the danger in him, the lethal control, the kind of power that made even the darkness seem afraid. "What's your name?" He was still holding her arm, his touch warm through her sleeve. "Jessica," she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes, gone too fast to identify. "Jessica," he repeated, like he was tasting it. "You shouldn't be walking alone at this hour." "I was just going home from work." "Where do you work?" "H. Corporation." His expression changed just slightly, a tightening around his eyes. "I see. Come, I'll take you home." "I don't even know your name." "Nam Yiwon." He said it like she should recognize it, and later she'd learned she should have. Nam Yiwon, the ghost of Seoul's underworld, the man who controlled half the city's criminal operations while maintaining a public face of legitimate business. The dragon who answered to no one. But in that moment, Jessica just saw her savior, and when he guided her toward a black sedan idling at the curb with a driver inside, she went. The next morning, Jessica woke in her apartment with hazy memories of Yiwon escorting her to her door, waiting until she locked it, his eyes tracking every shadow like threats lived in them. She'd found his business card on her counter, heavy stock with just a name and number, no title. She'd held it for a long time before tucking it into her wallet. At the office, Director Park was waiting. He called her into his office before she'd even set down her bag, closing the door with ominous finality. "Your quarterly report was unacceptable," he said in Korean, knowing she'd been told she didn't understand. "You're becoming a liability." Jessica stood silent, her nails digging into her palms. "I'm recommending your termination," he continued, "effective immediately." "You can't do that," Jessica said in Korean, the first time she'd revealed she understood. "My contract." Park's eyes widened, then narrowed with fury at being caught. "Your contract has a performance clause. You failed to meet standards." "I've exceeded every metric you've given me." "That's not what my reports say." He smiled, cruel and satisfied. "Pack your desk." Jessica felt the walls closing in. Without this job, she was done. Her visa, her mother's treatments, everything. "Please," she hated the word, hated the begging, but desperation made it necessary. "Give me another chance." "Why would I do that?" Park leaned back in his chair, enjoying her anguish. "You're nothing here, you'll always be nothing." That's when Jessica's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Jessica," Yiwon's voice, smooth and dark. "Are you at work?" "Yes." "Are you in trouble?" She glanced at Park, who was watching with suspicion. "Yes." "I'm in the building. 15th floor, come now." The line went dead. Jessica stared at her phone, then at Park. "I have a meeting." "You're fired. You don't have meetings." Jessica walked out anyway, her heart pounding. She took the elevator to the 15th floor, executive territory she'd never accessed. When the doors opened, a woman in an immaculate suit was waiting. "Miss Clark, this way, please." She was led through corridors of chrome and glass to massive double doors. The woman knocked once, then opened them, gesturing Jessica inside. The office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul minimalist furniture that cost more than Jessica's yearly salary. And behind a desk of black marble sat Nam Yiwon, looking every inch the apex predator in his domain. "Sit," he said, not a request. Jessica sat. Yiwon studied her with those intense dark eyes, and she felt stripped bare, every secret visible. "You're being fired," he said. "How did you know?" "I know everything that happens in this building." He stood, moving around the desk with fluid grace. "Because I own it." Jessica's world tilted. "What?" "H. Corporation. It's mine." Yiwon stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I'm the CEO, the owner. Everything here answers to me." "But you said you were." "I said my name. You didn't ask what I do." He crouched so they were eye level, and Jessica stopped breathing. "Why didn't you tell me you were being harassed?" "I didn't know you'd care." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "I care about what's mine." "I'm not yours." "Not yet," he agreed. "But you will be." He stood, returning to his desk. "Director Park is terminated, effective immediately. You're being promoted to senior financial analyst, reporting directly to me. Your salary is tripled. You'll move to company housing, a penthouse in Gangnam, and you'll never walk home alone again." Jessica couldn't process it. Why? Because I don't allow my people to be mistreated, Yi-won said. And because from the moment I saw you in that alley, fighting like you had nothing to lose, something in me recognized something in you. He leaned forward. You're under my protection now, Jessica. That means you're safe. It also means you're mine. You can't just claim people. I can do anything I want, he said softly. But I'm giving you a choice. Accept my offer, stay safe, succeed here, or leave and I'll ensure you have enough money to support your mother's medical treatments for years. He tilted his head. I know everything about you. Your loans, your mother's cancer, why you're really here. I could have helped without demands, but I'm being honest. I want you close. The choice is yours. Jessica stared at him, this beautiful, terrifying man who'd appeared like vengeance itself, and was now offering her everything she needed. What happens if I stay? You work for me, you let me protect you, and eventually, when you're ready, you give me what I want. Which is? You, Yi-won said simply. All of you. The next week passed in a blur. Jessica moved into the penthouse, a space so luxurious she felt like an imposter. Director Park disappeared, and rumors said he'd left Korea entirely, though the whispers suggested something darker. Jessica's new position came with respect, resources, and direct access to Yi-won, who called her into his office daily for reports that felt more like excuses to see her. She learned things about him in fragments. He was ruthless in business, untouchable in soul's shadows, feared by men who feared nothing. But with her, he was different. Protective. Attentive. When she worked late, he worked late. When she mentioned craving specific food, it appeared at her desk. When a colleague made an inappropriate comment, that colleague transferred to a regional office the next day. You're watching me, Jessica said one evening, alone in his office after everyone else had gone home. Yi-won didn't deny it. I watch everything that matters. I'm not special. You're the only thing that's been special in years. He stood from his desk, moving toward her with that predatory grace. Do you know what I do, Jessica? Really? I've heard the rumors. Mafia, criminal empire, the dragon of soul. And does that frighten you? She should say yes. Instead, she said, should it? Yi-won smiled, and it was beautiful and deadly. Not if you're mine. I protect what belongs to me. He stopped inches away. But I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things. I'll do more. If you stay close to me, you'll see darkness. I've seen darkness, Jessica said quietly. I've been living in it for 8 months. Not like mine. Then show me. The air between them crackled. Yi-won raised his hand, cupping her face with surprising tenderness. Not yet. You're not ready. Stop deciding what I'm ready for. When I show you who I really am, he said softly, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me. Is that what you want? Jessica didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of her did want it, wanted this dangerous man's protection, his attention, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Later that night, alone in the penthouse, Jessica stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and wondered what she was becoming. 3 weeks ago, she'd been surviving. Now she was thriving, protected by a monster, and the most terrifying part was how right it felt. The following evening, Yi-won took her to dinner. Not a business dinner, a real one, at a restaurant so exclusive they cleared the entire floor for his reservation. Jessica wore a dress he'd had delivered, deep emerald that hugged her curves, and when she emerged from her room, the way Yi-won looked at her made her skin heat. Beautiful, he said, offering his arm. During dinner, they talked, really talked, for the first time without the weight of business between them. Jessica learned he'd built his empire from nothing, taking over his father's struggling trading company and transforming it into a conglomerate while simultaneously running operations the law couldn't touch. He was brilliant, educated in London, fluent in 5 languages, and utterly alone despite being surrounded by people who feared and obeyed him. Why me? Jessica asked over dessert. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone, Yi-won said. I want you. From the moment I saw you fighting in that alley, refusing to break even when you were losing, I knew you were different. Strong, real, not afraid of me even when you should be. I'm afraid of you. Liar, he leaned forward. You're afraid of how I make you feel. There's a difference. He wasn't wrong. Jessica had never felt anything like the pull toward this man, magnetic and irresistible and completely insane. They were leaving the restaurant when it happened. A man approached Yi-won, speaking urgent Korean about a situation at one of the warehouses. Yi-won's expression turned cold, lethal, the businessman vanishing to reveal the dragon underneath. "Take her home," he told his driver, then to Jessica. "Stay in the penthouse. Lock the doors. Don't leave until I come for you." "What's wrong?" "Business." He kissed her forehead, quick and possessive. "I'll explain later, go." Jessica went, but sleep was impossible. She paced the penthouse, checking her phone obsessively, imagining worst-case scenarios. At 2 a.m, she heard the elevator, then Yi-won entered, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with blood. "Are you hurt?" Jessica rushed to him. "Not my blood," he caught her hands. "I told you I wasn't a good man." "Whose blood is it?" "Someone who betrayed me, someone who had to be reminded of consequences." His eyes searched hers. "Does this change things?" Jessica should have been horrified. Instead, she reached up, cupping his face like he'd done to hers. "Show me." "Show you what?" "The darkness, all of it. Stop protecting me from who you are." Yi-won's control cracked. He pulled her against him, kissing her with barely restrained hunger, months of wanting compressed into heat and need. Jessica kissed him back, her hands fisting in his blood-stained shirt, and when he lifted her, she wrapped her legs around his waist, anchoring herself to him. He carried her to the bedroom, laying her on the bed with a gentleness that contradicted his reputation. Then he stepped back, giving her one last chance to refuse. Jessica reached for him. What happened next was everything she'd imagined and more. Yi-won was careful, thorough, learning every sound she made, every reaction. He worshipped her curves with hands and mouth, whispered Korean praise she only half understood, and when he finally made her his, it felt like a brand, permanent and claiming. Jessica gave him everything, her body, her trust, her heart, and when it was over, she lay wrapped in his arms, feeling safer than she'd ever felt, loved by a monster who treated her like something precious. "I love you," Yi-won said against her hair. "I know it's fast, I know it's insane, but I've never felt this before and I'm not letting you go." "I love you too," Jessica whispered and meant it. They fell asleep tangled together, and Jessica thought maybe falling hadn't been the worst thing after all. Maybe it had been the beginning of everything. The next morning, Jessica woke alone. She found a note on the pillow in Yi-won's elegant handwriting. Had to handle business. "Stay here. You're safe. I'll be back tonight." The note should have been sweet. Instead, doubt crept in. Men said things in the heat of the moment. Men like Yi-won didn't really fall for women like her. She'd been a conquest, a challenge, and now that he'd won, the interest would fade. Jessica packed a bag and returned to her old apartment before she could change her mind. She told herself she'd go to work, act normal, protect her heart before it got destroyed. But when she arrived at the office, everything had changed. Her desk had been moved to the executive floor, right outside Yi-won's office, and he was waiting, leaning against the doorframe, with an expression of barely controlled fury. "Where were you?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "My apartment." "I told you to stay in the penthouse." "You don't own me." Yi-won moved so fast she gasped, backing her against the wall, his hands on either side of her head, caging her in. "Yes, I do. I told you that. You agreed when you let me touch you, when you said you loved me. You're mine, Jessica, and you don't run from me." "You'll get bored," she said, hatting how her voice shook. "Men like you always do." "Men like me?" His eyes flashed. "You think I'm like other men? I've killed for you. I've restructured my entire company around protecting you. I've never said I love you to anyone, and I said it to you. What do I have to do to make you understand you're not temporary?" "Then why did you leave?" "Because I had a business meeting I couldn't avoid. Because I thought you'd trust that I'd come back." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I always come back to you, always." Jessica felt tears burning. "I'm scared." "Of me?" "Of losing you. Of this being a dream I'll wake up from." Yi-won's expression softened. "This is real, I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her, slow and deep, a promise. "Move back to the penthouse. Let me take care of you, trust me." "Okay," Jessica whispered. "Okay," he smiled against her lips. I'll trust you. That afternoon, Yiwon had a company-wide meeting. He stood at the front of the auditorium, commanding and powerful, and announced Jessica's promotion to Director of International Finance, a position that made her the highest-ranking foreign employee in H. Waring's history. Then, in front of 200 people, he added, Miss Clark is also under my personal protection. Anyone who disrespects her, undermines her, or makes her feel unwelcome will answer to me directly. Am I clear? The message was received. Jessica became untouchable overnight. But protection came with a price. 2 weeks later, Jessica was working late when the power went out. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red. She heard shouting, gunfire, the sounds of violence echoing through the building. Her office door burst open, and men in masks rushed in, grabbing her before she could scream. They dragged her to the parking garage, throwing her into a van. Jessica fought, but there were too many. As they sped away, one of them made a phone call, speaking Korean about the dragon's woman, about ransoms, about sending messages. Jessica realized with cold certainty she'd been kidnapped because of Yiwon. They took her to a warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, binding her to a chair in a cold, dark space that smelled of rust and fear. The leader, a man with a scar bisecting his face, crouched in front of her. Nam Yiwon thinks he's untouchable, he said in accented English. We're going to teach him otherwise. You're the lesson. He'll kill you for this, Jessica said. Let him try. They left her alone in the darkness, and Jessica worked on her bindings, using techniques she'd learned from self-defense classes. She'd almost freed one hand when she heard it. Gunfire, screaming, the systematic sounds of people dying. Then silence, broken only by footsteps approaching her location. The warehouse door opened, and Yiwon stood backlit by flames, covered in blood, holding a gun, looking every inch the monster he'd warned her he was. Close your eyes, he said. Jessica didn't. She watched as he crossed to her, cutting her bindings with a knife he pulled from somewhere, checking her for injuries with shaking hands. Are you hurt? His voice was raw. No. Did they touch you? No. Yiwon pulled her against him, his heart racing against her ear. I thought I lost you. I thought... His control broke, and he kissed her desperately, like she was air and he'd been drowning. I'm okay, Jessica whispered. I'm okay. I killed them all, he said. Every single one, and I'd do it again. I'd burn this entire city down to keep you safe. Jessica believed him. She'd seen the bodies on her way out, the carnage Yiwon had delivered without hesitation. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt safe, protected by a man who'd gone to war for her. Back at the penthouse, Yiwon wouldn't let her out of his sight. He bathed her gently, washing away the fear and the dirt, then carried her to bed, holding her like she might disappear. This is why I tried to keep you separate, he said into the darkness. My world is dangerous. My enemies will use you against me. Then we face them together. Jessica... I'm not leaving you, she interrupted. I love you, I choose you, danger and all. Yiwon was quiet for a long moment. Then, marry me. Jessica's breath caught. What? Marry me, he repeated, propping himself up to look at her. Be mine officially. Let me protect you legally, financially, completely. Marry me and no one will ever dare touch you again. That's not a romantic proposal. I love you, Yiwon said. You're the only light in my darkness, the only thing that makes me want to be better. I'll spend the rest of my life protecting you, worshipping you, giving you everything you deserve. Marry me, Jessica. Choose me the way I've chosen you. Jessica looked at this dangerous, beautiful man who'd saved her, protected her, loved her despite and because of who she was. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Yiwon kissed her, and it felt like a vow, binding and permanent. They married 3 weeks later in a private ceremony with only close family. Jessica's mother flew from Atlanta, weak but smiling, crying with joy that her daughter had found someone who'd move heaven and earth for her. Yiwon's family, powerful and intimidating, welcomed Jessica with surprising warmth, recognizing that she'd somehow tamed their dragon. The wedding was beautiful, traditional Korean mixed with American elements, and when Yiwon slipped the ring on Jessica's finger, his hands shook slightly, the only sign of emotion in his controlled exterior. Mine, he whispered. Yours, she agreed. Would you risk everything for a love that could destroy you? If you believe some bonds are worth the danger, subscribe to Black and Soul TV, because this story is just getting started. 6 months into their marriage, Jessica stood in the executive bathroom at Hwarang, staring at 3 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the marble counter. Her hand trembled as she pressed against her still flat stomach, a mixture of joy and terror flooding through her. A baby, Yiwon's baby. Their baby. She'd planned to tell him that evening over dinner, something romantic and memorable. Instead, everything fell apart. She returned to her office to find Dante, Yiwon's right-hand man, waiting with an expression that made her blood run cold. Mrs. Nam, you need to come with me. Now. What happened? There's been an incident. The boss wants you secured. Jessica's heart hammered as Dante rushed her through back corridors to a reinforced safe room in the building's basement. Inside, she found Yiwon's mother and sister, both looking worried but calm, clearly used to this. What's going on? Jessica demanded. The Kang family, Yiwon's mother said quietly. They've declared war. They attacked 3 of Yiwon's operations simultaneously. This is retaliation. For what? For Yiwon refusing to marry their daughter last year. They've been planning this for months. Jessica felt sick. She was locked in a safe room while Yiwon fought a war, and she was carrying his child, and she couldn't tell him, couldn't help, could only wait and pray. Hours passed like years. Then the door opened, and Yiwon entered, bloodied but alive, his eyes scanning the room until they found Jessica. He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with bruising intensity. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her, checking frantically. I'm fine, are you? Nothing that matters. He pulled back, cupping her face. I need to leave the city for a few days, finish this. I'm sending you to the family estate in Jeju. You'll be safe there. No. Jessica, I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. His voice turned hard. I won't risk you, not for anything. Then you don't have a choice either, Jessica said, her hand moving to her stomach. Because I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Yiwon stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, then pure, incandescent joy. You're pregnant. 3 tests, all positive. Yiwon dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach, his hands shaking. A baby, our baby. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, the first she'd ever seen. I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a father, Jessica confirmed, her own tears falling. He stood, kissing her desperately. Then I end this war tonight. I'm not letting my child grow up with this threat. The Kangs wanted war. I'll give them annihilation. Yiwon. Trust me, he said. I've never failed you. I won't start now. He left, and Jessica waited in the safe room with his family, listening to distant sounds of violence, praying to every god she could name. 12 hours later, Yiwon returned, exhausted but victorious. The Kang family had surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. Jessica was safe. Their baby was safe. It's done, he said, sinking beside her. We're safe. We're safe, Jessica repeated, letting herself believe it. The next months passed in a blur of joy and preparation. Jessica's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing in ways that made Yiwon even more protective, more possessive, more devoted. He attended every doctor's appointment, held her hair when morning sickness struck, rubbed her feet when they swelled, and talked to her growing belly every night, promising their daughter. They were having a girl, that she'd be the most protected, most loved child in the world. Hwarang Corporation thrived under their joint leadership. Jessica had proven herself brilliant, transforming entire departments, and with Yiwon's support, she'd become one of the most powerful executives in Seoul. The racism that had nearly destroyed her was gone, replaced by respect, fear, and the knowledge that she was untouchable as the dragon's wife. Jessica's mother's health improved with access to better treatments, and she visited often, falling in love with Seoul and her soon-to-be granddaughter. The life Jessica had barely dared dream of became her reality, and the man who'd seemed like a monster turned out to be her salvation. 7 months pregnant, Jessica stood in the nursery they'd designed together, running her hand over the crib Yiwon had insisted on building himself. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, his hands settling over her swollen belly. "I love you," he said, "more than I thought possible to love anything." "I love you too," Jessica whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me," Yiwon corrected. "I was a monster before you. You made me human again." "You were always human. I just reminded you." Their daughter was born on a snowy December morning, perfect and healthy, with her mother's dark skin and her father's intense eyes. They named her Jai-hai, wisdom and love, and when Yiwon held her for the first time, crying openly, Jessica knew that everything they'd been through had led to this moment. The dragon of soul, feared by thousands, reduced to tears by 8 pounds of perfection. Later, when Jai-hai was sleeping peacefully and they were alone, Yiwon pulled Jessica into his arms. "Thank you," he said, "for choosing me, for trusting me, for giving me everything." "Thank you for catching me when I fell," Jessica replied. "For protecting me, for loving me when I didn't think I was worth loving." "You're worth everything," Yiwon said fiercely, "and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." 3 years later, Jessica stood in the same executive conference room where she'd once been humiliated, now addressing the board as Chief Operating Officer of H. Waring Corporation. Beside her was Yiwon, CEO, and her husband, their partnership legendary in Korean business circles. In the corner, their daughter played quietly, watched by attentive bodyguards who'd die before letting anything happen to the dragon's princess. Jessica presented her strategic vision for H. Waring's future, brilliant and confident, every word respected and implemented. This was her company now too, her empire built alongside her husband's, and no one dared question her place. After the meeting, Yiwon pulled her into his office, kissing her deeply. "You were magnificent." "I learned from the best." "I'm still learning from you," he smiled against her lips. "You make me better every day." "And you make me fearless." They stood together, looking out over Seoul, the city that had tried to break Jessica, but instead became her kingdom. She thought about the terrified woman who'd been attacked in an alley, saved by a monster who turned out to be her destiny. She thought about discrimination and danger, violence and victory, and how sometimes the darkest paths led to the brightest futures. "Any regrets?" Yiwon asked. Jessica looked at their daughter, at the wedding ring on her finger, at the man who'd burned down the world to protect her. "Not a single one." "Good," he pulled her closer, "because I'm not done with you yet. I'm going to spend the rest of our lives making you happy." "You already do," Jessica said, "every single day." That evening, they returned to the penthouse, now filled with signs of their life together. Jai-hai's toys, Jessica's books, Yiwon's business files, the beautiful chaos of a family. They had dinner together, bathed their daughter together, put her to bed together, every moment a gift Jessica never took for granted. Later, wrapped in Yiwon's arms in their bed, Jessica thought about how far she'd come. From hiding bruises and swallowing discrimination to running a corporation and raising a daughter who'd never know what it felt like to be diminished. From survival to triumph. From alone to beloved. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you more," Yiwon replied, the same argument they had every night. "Impossible." "Watch me prove it." He kissed her, and it still felt like the first time, electric and perfect and right. Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility. Inside, Jessica had everything she'd ever needed. Love, family, power, protection, and a man who'd chosen her above everything. The dragon who'd proven that monsters could have the gentlest hearts. She'd collapsed in that conference room years ago, broken and hopeless. But she'd been caught by exactly the right hands, dangerous and devoted, and those hands had lifted her higher than she'd ever dreamed possible. Sometimes salvation came from unexpected places. Sometimes the most dangerous men made the safest havens. And sometimes, falling was exactly what you needed to fly. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Black in Soul TV if you believe love can conquer anything. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and let's keep celebrating stories where darkness meets light, where monsters find redemption, and where Black women build empires. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is trust the hands that catch you when you fall.